The knock wasn't a knock at all, it was a slam. Papers flew off my desk as the door burst open, and before I could even turn around, a voice like breaking glass cut through my office. "Where are they, Elena?" My pen froze mid-signature. Evelyn Whitfield stood in the doorway, tall, severe, wrapped in a beige coat that screamed old money and new anger. Her pearl earrings caught the morning light like tiny weapons. Behind her, Madison hovered her younger daughter with that same icy smirk I used to see across the dinner table when she thought I didn't belong in their family. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe this was about the house Ryan and I sold after the divorce. But then Evelyn's manicured hand slammed a manila envelope onto my desk so hard my coffee cup trembled. "Don't you dare play games with us," she hissed. "We know about the children." My breath caught. "The what?" I managed, voice thin, disbelieving. "Our grandchildren." Evelyn spat the word, dripping with venom. "The ones you've been hiding for 6 years." I blinked, my brain trying to translate insanity into English. "You've lost me, Evelyn. Ryan and I tried for years," she snapped, cutting me off. "Yes, I remember. But you didn't tell us the treatments worked, did you? You ran away instead, took our blood and our name, and disappeared with them." Her tone cracked like a whip. Madison stepped forward, eyes gleaming. "You can stop pretending now. We have proof." She opened the envelope, scattering glossy photos across my legal briefs. 2 children, maybe 5 or 6. A boy and a girl. Dark hair, bright eyes, a faint resemblance that hit like a punch to the chest. I couldn't breathe. "Who are these kids?" I whispered. "You tell us," Madison said coldly. "You're their mother." For a moment, the office blurred. The sunlight through the blinds carved harsh lines across Evelyn's face, and all I could think was, this is madness. I pushed back from my chair, rising slowly, steadying my voice. "You've made a mistake. Ryan and I never had children. I was never pregnant." Evelyn laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "We have medical records, birth certificates, school documents, everything. You can't lie your way out this time." I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't here for answers, she was here for blood. "Get out," I said quietly, "before I call security." Madison snorted. "You can call whoever you want, but we're not leaving until you tell us where you're keeping them. You can't just move them to another state like you did last time." "Last time," I echoed. "What are you even talking about?" Evelyn pulled out her phone. "We'll let the court handle it. We have rights as grandparents." That word rights made my stomach twist. I reached for my phone with a shaking hand. "Fine," I said. "Let's involve the lawyers. I can prove I've never had children." My assistant Lucy peeked in her eyes wide. "Brooks," she said softly. "There's a man here asking about the kids, too. He says he's a private investigator hired by Mr. Whitfield." For a split second, the room tilted. Ryan, of course. My ex-husband, the man who once said I was too cold to be a mother. I took a deep breath, my pulse hammering in my ears, and forced my voice to steady. "Send him in," I told Lucy. Evelyn's lips curved into a smile so smug it made my skin crawl. "Finally," she said, "you're ready to tell the truth." I didn't answer. I stood behind my desk, the photos of 2 strangers staring up at me, my hands trembling over them. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup, and Ryan was behind it. The man who stepped in looked like every cliché of a private investigator you'd see in an old courtroom drama. Cheap gray suit, thinning hair, and eyes that had seen too many bad lies. He cleared his throat, clutching a worn leather folder. "Mrs. Brooks," he began formally. "I'm Carl Duncan. I was hired by Mr. Ryan Whitfield to locate his missing children." Missing. The word rang in my ears like a siren. "You're wasting your time," I said flatly. "There are no children." But Carl didn't blink. He opened the folder and began laying out documents across my desk as if we were conducting a trial. Each page landed with a soft thud. Birth certificates, medical forms, school enrollment documents. "According to these records, he said you gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, on May 15th, 6 years ago, in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Their names are Daniel and Lily Brooks." I stared at the papers, at my name typed neatly next to a hospital that I had never been to. "That's not possible," I said, shaking my head. I was in Denver at that time. I can prove it. Evelyn's voice rose again, sharp and triumphant. Then why do these records exist? I turned to her, my patience fraying. Because someone forged them. You think I wouldn't remember giving birth? Madison folded her arms. You were on medication, weren't you? Maybe you don't remember everything. Her tone dripped with pity, disguised as poison. That hit deeper than I expected. There had been a time, months during my depression after the failed fertility treatments, when I could barely tell one day from the next. Ryan had called me unstable back then, said I was losing grip with reality. Was he laying the groundwork even then? I felt the edges of my sanity tremble, but I forced myself to stand straighter. You're accusing me of kidnapping children that don't exist. Do you hear how insane that sounds? Evelyn snapped. You can drop the act, Elena. You always wanted control. You took Ryan's money, his house, and now you're trying to erase his family name by hiding his bloodline. Her words sliced through me like broken glass. His bloodline, I repeated. You mean the same man who cheated through half our marriage? The air went heavy. Madison flinched, but Evelyn didn't blink. He made mistakes, but you drove him to them. You couldn't give him what he needed. I laughed bitterly, disbelief catching in my throat. You mean children that wasn't something I could choose, Evelyn. I tried. God, I tried until I could barely walk from the injections. My voice cracked emotion bleeding through my calm facade. And now you're standing here accusing me of stealing kids to make up for it. That's sick. For the first time, Carl Duncan looked uneasy. Ma'am, he said quietly, these are verified records. I've tracked financial trails, property rentals, even photographs. He slid one toward me. It was a picture of a woman, me but blurry, slightly off, standing beside two children at a park. Except it wasn't me. The mouth was wrong, the eyes too dull, the stance uncertain. It was a face that had been built to look like mine. That's not me, I whispered. You sure? Madison sneered. Funny how your memory gets selective when it suits you. I wanted to scream to throw every paper out the window, but instead I forced myself to breathe. My phone buzzed. Rebecca Hayes, my lawyer and oldest friend, had texted, "Heard from your assistant. Sit tight. Don't talk. I'm on my way." Relief pricked my eyes. I looked back at Evelyn. You want the truth? I said quietly. Fine. Let's call our lawyers and put everything on record. Evelyn smirked. Finally taking responsibility. No, I said, voice cold now. Finally ending your circus. Outside, I could hear my staff whispering. The rumors were already starting. What if the Whitfields were right? What if Elena Brooks, the calm, polished attorney, had hidden an entire life? The humiliation was suffocating. Evelyn leaned closer, lowering her voice. You think you can outsmart us again? Ryan has money, evidence, and the law. We'll take those children from you one way or another. You can't take what doesn't exist, I said. She smiled cruelly. We'll see about that. Carl closed his folder with a heavy sigh, nodding to them before turning to leave. I'll submit everything to the court, he said, avoiding my eyes. As the door clicked shut behind them, my office finally went silent, except for the frantic pounding of my heart. The photos, the papers, the accusations, they all lay scattered before me like a grave I hadn't realized I'd been buried in. My hands shook as I reached for my phone again. Rebecca, I said when she answered, it's worse than I thought. They have everything. By the time Rebecca arrived, I was sitting behind my desk like a ghost. The papers were still spread out in front of me, my name printed in bold on forms that felt stolen from another universe. She didn't bother knocking, just shut the door behind her and locked it. All right, she said briskly, setting her briefcase down. Start from the top. What exactly did they show you? Her tone steadied me, a lifeline in the chaos. I explained everything. Evelyn's accusations, the photos, the supposed medical records, and the private investigator who seemed almost too composed for someone dealing with fiction. When I finished, Rebecca picked up one of the documents and frowned. They're good, she admitted. Too good. These weren't made by amateurs. She squinted at a seal in the corner. Mercy General Hospital, Santa Fe. That place closed 8 years ago. I blinked. Closed. She nodded. That's our first crack. But whoever did this had access to official templates, data systems, and birth record codes. Ryan couldn't have pulled this off alone. The mention of his name sent a chill through me. You think he paid someone? He paid the right someone, she said grimly. We'll trace the trail, but you need to stay quiet. They'll try to provoke you into saying something that can be used in court. She started taking photos of the documents with her phone fingers flying across the screen as she forwarded them to her contact at the state registrar's office. I sank back into my chair. Rebecca, I murmured, what if they've been building this for years? She paused, meeting my eyes. Then we make sure they regret it. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. She'd seen her share of manipulation cases. This one reeked of strategy, not confusion. Before she could say more, Lucy knocked hesitantly and slipped in. Ms. Brooks, she whispered. Mr. Duncan is still in the lobby. He said he needs to drop off something he forgot. Rebecca exchanged a look with me, then nodded. Send him in. Carl returned, clutching an additional folder. He looked uncomfortable now, less confident. I realized I had more evidence for the report, he said quietly, setting the folder down. Rebecca's tone turned professional, but cutting. You understand that what you're doing if these documents are false could cost you your license, right? He swallowed hard. I only follow what my client provides. Mr. Whitfield told me his wife was unstable, that she'd taken the twins after a breakdown. Ex-wife, I corrected. And that's a lie. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the door as if expecting Ryan himself to appear. He showed me credit card records, rental agreements under your name, photos with timestamps. Rebecca flipped through the files. These timestamps, she muttered, are embedded, not metadata from the camera. They were edited. Sloppy work for someone trying to build a case. Carl's shoulders sagged. Look, I don't know what's real anymore. The man paid me double my usual rate and said it was urgent, something about his mother threatening to cut him off if he didn't prove paternity. I felt the sting of betrayal crawl up my spine. Evelyn again. She'd always protected him, always turned his failures into someone else's fault. You've been used, Mr. Duncan, Rebecca said flatly. You might want to consider getting ahead of this before the state investigator comes knocking. He blinked. What are you implying? That this entire mess, she said, gesturing to the pile of forgeries, is about to blow up in court, and you'll be listed as a key witness either for the prosecution or the defense. The color drained from his face. He nodded stiffly and left without another word. When the door closed, Rebecca exhaled slowly. Ryan's setting the stage for something bigger. This isn't just about reputation, it's about money. Custody gives him leverage, inheritance, media sympathy, and his family's buying the performance. He knows how to make them believe anything I whispered. He always did. Rebecca leaned on the desk, her voice low. Then we do what we do best. We prove him wrong. I'll file a counterclaim for defamation and false documentation. But Elena, her voice softened, you need to brace yourself. They're going to drag your name through the mud before this is over. I nodded, staring at the forged photos. Somewhere between fear and fury, something solid began to take shape inside me, a quiet, deliberate kind of strength. Let them try, I said. I'm done playing defense. Outside the window, Denver's winter sky hung gray and heavy, and for the first time in years, I welcomed the storm. Rebecca didn't waste a second once Carl was gone. She spread the forgeries across the desk like crime scene evidence, her pen tapping against each seal and signature with surgical precision. Every forged document tells a story. She muttered, her tone a mix of fascination and disgust, and this one's screaming for attention. She circled the hospital name. Mercy General closed in 2017, but this certificate stated 2019. Whoever faked this didn't expect anyone to check the closure record. She looked up. Ryan's getting reckless. I tried to respond, but my throat tightened. He's always been reckless, I said finally. Just never this desperate. Rebecca sighed. He's desperate because you're clean. You walked away with nothing he could use against you. That drives narcissists insane. I felt the truth of it like a bruise. Ryan had hated losing control over me, over our image, over the illusion of being the perfect husband. Now he was clawing for it back through deceit. Rebecca placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. You need to stay calm, Elena. They want you rattled. You've built your career on logic, use it now. I nodded, swallowing the storm in my chest. What's the plan? First, she said we verify the source of these records. If they came from a corrupted state database, we'll subpoena the digital trail. Second, I'll reach out to the New Mexico registrar under confidentiality. Third, she paused, her eyes narrowing. We find out who those children really are. Her words chilled me. You think they exist? Someone took those photos. If they're real kids, we need to find them before Ryan spins his story any further. I stared at the smiling faces in the forged pictures. They looked happy, ordinary, innocent. The thought that they were being used as props in Ryan's scheme made bile rise in my throat. Rebecca gathered the documents into a neat stack and stood. I'll contact a forensic data analyst I trust. But Elena, she hesitated at the door. You need to prepare yourself for whatever we find. If he's gone this far, he's not stopping at paper. Meaning, I asked quietly. Meaning he might have convinced someone else to play along. When she left, I sat alone in the silence she'd left behind. The office lights flickered softly over the fake birth certificates, and for the first time in years, I felt the old panic clawing at the edges of my composure. The same suffocating dread I'd lived through during those fertility treatments when every injection felt like a gamble between hope and heartbreak. I had sacrificed my body, my peace, my pride for a dream Ryan never really wanted, and now, somehow, he was turning that sacrifice into ammunition. The phone on my desk buzzed again. A notification from the court's online system, emergency petition filed, custody hearing scheduled. Rebecca had warned me, but seeing it in black and white still felt like a punch. My name was listed as the respondent in a case that accused me of concealing minors from paternal guardianship. Beneath it was Ryan's digital signature, perfectly smug even in pixels. My hand shook as I closed the screen. Outside, the day had dimmed into gray snow beginning to fall over the city. I pressed my palms against the cool glass of the window, breathing hard. Somewhere, Ryan was probably sipping whiskey, watching the chaos unfold, certain he'd already won. He'd always believed the truth was just another narrative, one you could rewrite with enough confidence and cash. But not this time. I turned back to the desk, gathered every false page, and whispered to the empty room. You forged the wrong woman. The first headline appeared 2 days later. Prominent Denver attorney sued for concealing children. By noon, my inbox was a battlefield. Reporters, old clients, even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted a comment. Evelyn had gone public. The family statement quoted her word for word. We are heartbroken that our grandchildren have been kept from us. We only want what's best for the children and for our son. It was manipulative perfection, soft enough for sympathy, sharp enough to bury me alive. Rebecca called before I could finish reading. Don't answer anything, she ordered. Every response becomes ammunition. We'll speak through the court filings only. She went to the press, I said numbly. She knows exactly how to ruin me. Then we hit back harder with evidence, not emotion, Rebecca replied. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the same fury I felt boiling under her control. I turned on the TV, just long enough to see the Whitfields standing on the courthouse steps. Evelyn Pearls gleaming under camera lights. Ryan beside her looking mournful, perfectly rehearsed. Madison clutched a photo of the twins, her lips trembling like she'd practiced in front of a mirror. They looked like a family tragedy, and I, the absent mother, was the villain. I turned it off before the bile reached my throat. That night, the firm partners asked me to take a leave of absence until things settled. I understood the subtext. Clients were nervous. My name was bad for business. Alone in my apartment, I stared at the empty crib in the corner of my mind, the one that never existed but somehow now haunted me. Rebecca called again. The hearing's been fast-tracked, she said. 2 weeks. He's pushing for emergency custody. Custody of what I asked, half laughing, half crying. Air custody of a lie, she said quietly. But it'll look real until we prove otherwise. I sank into the couch, the weight of exhaustion pressing down. He's winning the narrative. Not for long, Rebecca promised. I found something financial records from his company showing wire transfers to a woman named Caroline Mills. The dates line up with the birth certificates. Who is she? That's what I'm going to find out. But Elena, brace yourself. This could get uglier before it gets better. I thought it already was as ugly as it could get, but I was wrong. 2 nights later, a neighbor left a note taped to my door. Baby thief. The letters were thick black and childish, like someone trying too hard to be cruel. I tore it down and sat on the floor shaking. I had spent my life fighting other people's legal wars, defending strangers against manipulation and injustice, and now I was the monster in someone else's story. That realization stung deeper than anything Ryan could fabricate. The next morning, Rebecca met me at her office with coffee strong enough to cut steel. The registrar confirmed it, she said. Mercy General was closed, but the digital record system was sold to a private contractor for archiving. Someone inside tampered with the old database. That's how they produced real-looking certificates. My stomach turned. So this isn't just personal, it's criminal. Exactly. Which means when this blows open, Ryan's entire family reputation will burn with it. She smiled grimly. He thinks this is a custody battle. It's going to turn into a fraud investigation. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of satisfaction warmed my chest. Good, I said. Let's burn everything he built on lies. But as we sat in silence afterward watching the snow swirl beyond the window, another thought crept in, a quieter, more painful one. There had been a time I believed in Ryan. A time when I gave up promotions, weekends, and pieces of myself just to save our marriage. I had mistaken his need for control as love. I had sacrificed everything for a man who would one day accuse me of stealing children I never had. That realization didn't make me cry. It made me cold. He's not getting away with this, I said softly. Rebecca's eyes met mine. Then, let's make sure the court sees what kind of man he really is. Rebecca's call came early the next morning, her tone clipped but electric. I found her, she said without preamble. Caroline Mills, 34 pediatric nurse at St. Vincent's in Albuquerque. She has twins born the exact day listed on those forged certificates. I sat upright, heart slamming against my ribs. Are you sure? Positive. I checked her social media. The kids are identical to the ones in your photos. For a second, I couldn't breathe. So they're real. They're real, Rebecca confirmed, but they're not yours. And I'd bet everything Ryan is their father. The room tilted. I stood, gripping the counter to stay upright. He had an affair, I whispered, while we were still doing treatments. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Rebecca's voice softened. He didn't just cheat. He built this entire lie to hide it. I closed my eyes, the memories flooding back, the fertility appointments, the shots that made me dizzy, Ryan's constant criticism when the tests failed. All that sacrifice, all that hope. He'd been lying the entire time. Rebecca continued. Caroline filed a sealed paternity suit 6 years ago against a prominent businessman. The timeline matches. I can't access the sealed documents, but the court clerk confirmed the initials R.W. My throat went dry. Ryan Whitfield. She exhaled. Exactly. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. He told everyone I was unstable, that I left because I couldn't handle motherhood. And now he's pretending I stole his kids to protect himself. Rebecca's tone hardened. He's playing the long game. If he gets the court to recognize you as their mother, even temporarily, it erases the affair and makes you responsible for everything. He keeps his image, his family's money, and Caroline's silence. I sank onto the couch, the shock giving way to something sharper. He's not just protecting himself, I said slowly. He's punishing me for leaving. Rebecca didn't deny it. We're filing a counter-petition today. Fraud, defamation, and evidence tampering. And I'm subpoenaing Caroline. She deserves to know what he's done. Hours later, I sat in Rebecca's office while she drafted the documents, the rhythmic clack of her keyboard, the only sound. Snow was falling again, silent and relentless against the window. You okay? She asked, without looking up. No, I admitted. But I'm angry enough to fight. She gave a brief nod. Good. Anger's fuel. Just don't let it blind you. That night, I scrolled through Caroline's public posts until I found one photo that stopped me cold, her children on a playground. Ryan's unmistakable jawline echoed in the boy's smile. My stomach turned. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. They looked happy safe. They had no idea the man who fathered them was destroying lives to protect his own reputation. I closed the laptop, feeling a strange, hollow pity. He'd used everyone, me Caroline, even his own children, to keep his image intact. Around midnight, Rebecca texted a single line subpoena approved. Hearing moved up to Friday. The words glowed in the darkness like a fuse being lit. I lay awake, watching the ceiling shadows shift my mind, replaying every lie Ryan had ever told, every manipulation I'd mistaken for love. The sacrifices I'd made for him weren't mistakes, they were lessons written in scar tissue. By dawn, I wasn't trembling anymore. I brewed coffee dressed in black and stared at my reflection. "You wanted a war," I whispered to the empty apartment. "Now you've got one." When I arrived at the office, Rebecca was already waiting with folders stacked high. "The registrar's cooperating," she said. "Once we show the tampered records, the case collapses. But I want Caroline in that courtroom when it happens. You think she'll come?" "She has children to protect," Rebecca said. "If she's anything like you, she'll show up." I met her eyes in this glass reflection, two women who'd seen enough lies to last a lifetime. "Then let's end this," I said quietly. The city outside was waking up unaware that a reckoning was coming. Rebecca and I drove to Albuquerque the next day, snow swirling across the highway like ash in the wind. Neither of us spoke much. Every mile brought us closer to the woman who unknowingly held the key to the lie that had destroyed my life. When we reached St. Vincent's Medical Center, Rebecca parked and turned to me. "Let me do the talking first. You'll get your chance." I nodded, palms slick with sweat. Inside, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee. A nurse directed us to the pediatric ward where Caroline Mills was finishing her shift. She looked younger than I expected, pale-tired with kind eyes that didn't belong in a scandal. Rebecca introduced us, explaining we needed a few minutes about a legal matter involving Ryan Whitfield. The color drained from Caroline's face. She led us into an empty break room and closed the door. "What's this about?" she asked, voice trembling. Rebecca laid a sealed envelope on the table. "These are birth certificates listing Elena Brooks as the mother of your twins." "Do you know anything about that?" Caroline stared at the documents as if they were written in another language. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Those are my kids." "We know," I said softly. "But Ryan filed them as part of a custody suit claiming I kidnapped them." She looked at me, eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. "He said he'd fixed everything after the paternity suit," she murmured. "He told me his wife was sick, that she couldn't have kids, and that he needed to protect his reputation for his family's business. I didn't want trouble, so I signed whatever he put in front of me." Her hands were shaking now. "He promised the records would stay sealed." "He lied," Rebecca said. "And now you're part of his fraud. The only way to clear yourself is to testify." Caroline covered her face, a muffled sob escaping her. "I thought I was helping him. I thought—" She looked up, tears streaking her cheeks. "I thought he loved me." The words twisted something deep inside me, familiar and painful. "He doesn't love anyone he can't control," I said quietly. She nodded, broken. Rebecca slid a tissue box across the table. "You can make this right. The hearing's tomorrow. Tell the judge the truth, and you'll protect your children from becoming part of this circus." Caroline hesitated, then took a shaky breath. "I'll do it." Outside, as we walked back to the car, Rebecca exhaled. "That's it. That's our witness." I stared out at the gray skyline. "It's more than that," I said. "It's proof of who he really is." The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with reporters. Flashbulbs popped as Evelyn and Ryan arrived, flanked by their attorney. I watched from the corridor, calm on the surface, rage burning underneath. When Rebecca and I entered the courtroom, Ryan's eyes met mine. For a moment, I saw the flicker of unease behind his smirk. He hadn't expected me to show up. He certainly hadn't expected what was coming. The judge called the case to order. Ryan's lawyer launched into a speech about a mother's emotional instability and grandparents' rights, his words dripping with performative concern. Rebecca let him finish, then stood, voice steady. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense requests to submit additional evidence regarding the authenticity of the documents presented by Mr. Whitfield." She handed the clerk a file. The judge skimmed it, frowning. "Mercy General Hospital 2019. That hospital closed in 2017. Ryan's lawyer stammered, trying to recover, but Rebecca was already moving. We also have testimony from Ms. Caroline Mills, the biological mother of the children in question. Gasps rippled through the gallery as the courtroom doors opened. Caroline stepped inside, her hands trembling but her spine straight. Ryan's expression went from confusion to panic in a single heartbeat. "What is she doing here?" he hissed to his lawyer. The judge gestured for silence. Caroline took the stand, her voice quivering but clear. "These are my children," she said. "Ryan Whitfield is their father. He told me his wife was unstable and needed my help to keep things quiet. I didn't know he forged Elena's name." Evelyn's face went white. Madison covered her mouth. Ryan slumped back in his chair, eyes darting wildly. The lie he'd built for 6 years was crumbling piece by piece. When Rebecca turned to me, her eyes said it all. It was over. The courtroom felt smaller than I remembered, the air so heavy with tension it was hard to breathe. I could hear every shuffle, every whisper, the sound of paper sliding across polished oak as the judge adjusted the stack of evidence before her. Ryan sat 2 tables away, his posture stiff but his eyes wild, his perfect composure slipping in slow motion. Evelyn was behind him, wringing her hands, whispering prayers to a God she only remembered when her family name was at stake. Madison sat next to her, tears streaking her makeup, trying to look like a victim in someone else's disaster. Caroline was still on the stand, holding herself together by threads, the weight of her own guilt breaking through every word. "Mr. Whitfield," the judge said sharply, her tone slicing through the air. "Do you have any explanation for why there are 2 sets of birth certificates for the same children?" Ryan's lawyer jumped up like a drowning man reaching for a branch. "Your Honor, my client was misled." "He believed his ex-wife, I corrected softly. The judge didn't look at me, but one corner of her mouth twitched. His ex-wife had suffered a psychological episode, the lawyer continued, and that she falsified records to claim maternity. Mr. Whitfield had no reason to suspect wrongdoing. Rebecca rose slowly, her confidence radiating like quiet thunder. No reason, she said. He paid a data technician $25,000 to access an archived hospital database. He filed these forged records himself, and when Ms. Mills, his mistress at the time, refused to stay silent, he sealed the paternity suit and invented a narrative about my client's mental instability. She turned to Ryan, her gaze steady. "That's not confusion, Your Honor. That's premeditation." Ryan's jaw clenched so tightly I could almost hear the enamel crack. "That's a lie," he shouted, standing abruptly. "She's twisting everything." The judge's gavel slammed. "Sit down, Mr. Whitfield." Evelyn's hand shot forward, gripping his sleeve, but he shook her off. "She's doing this for revenge," he yelled, pointing at me. "She ruined my life, and now she's trying to destroy my family." His voice echoed off the marble walls, ugly and raw. For the first time, I didn't flinch. I met his glare and said clearly, "You did that yourself." The judge motioned for silence again, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Whitfield, she said it seems to me that the only person attempting to destroy this family is the one who forged legal documents, manipulated witnesses, and lied to this court." Ryan's lawyer sank back into his seat, defeated. Rebecca handed over the final piece of evidence, a bank transfer receipt, and an email chain between Ryan and the data technician. The room fell into a stunned quiet as the judge read. When she finally spoke, her voice was steel. "This court finds that the custody petition is not only baseless, but fraudulent. Mr. Whitfield, you are hereby charged with document forgery fraud and obstruction of justice. Bailiff." The click of handcuffs echoed like thunder. Evelyn gasped as the bailiff stepped forward and took her son by the arms. Mom Ryan barked, panic breaking through his arrogance. "Do something!" But she just stared at him, eyes wide and hollow. For years, she'd worshipped his perfection. Now she was watching her god fall. Madison sobbed, openly whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over, though I wasn't sure who she was saying it to. Rebecca leaned towards me, voice low. "It's over." But it didn't feel over. It felt like a life unraveling in slow motion, thread by thread, every lie exposing another beneath it. Caroline broke down on the stand, tears falling freely. "I didn't want this," she said, voice shaking. "I just wanted my kids to be safe." The judge nodded sympathetically. You won't be charged. Ms. Mills provided you continue to cooperate. Caroline nodded, clutching the edge of the witness box as though it were the only solid thing in the room. Ryan turned toward me as the bailiff led him away. His voice was hoarse, desperate. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said quietly. It makes me free. The cameras caught every second. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps before I even made it outside, microphones flashing like fireflies in a storm. Ms. Brooks, did you fabricate the records? How long have you known about the forgery? Will you press charges? Rebecca shielded me with her arm and said firmly, No comments. But Evelyn pushed past us, her voice breaking. We didn't know, she cried to the reporters. He told us she ran away with the twins. We didn't know she was shaking mascara streaked the perfect matriarch undone in front of the entire city. Madison tried to help her, but Evelyn shoved her away. You defended him, she hissed. You told me Elena was lying. The crowd devoured every word. Rebecca guided me to the car, her hand steady on my back. Don't look back, she murmured. But I did, just once. Ryan was being loaded into a police car, his designer suit wrinkled, his face red with humiliation. The man who once strutted through boardrooms now looked small, ordinary, fragile. Evelyn stood frozen on the courthouse steps, surrounded by flashing cameras, the same way she'd once stood over me in my office, full of certainty and scorn. I wondered if she finally understood how it felt to have your world collapse in public. Inside the car, Rebecca handed me a folder. Official ruling, she said. Case dismissed, all charges transferred to him. You're clear. I took it with shaking hands. Thank you, I whispered. You saved me. No, she said, starting the engine. You saved yourself. I just handed the truth a microphone. As we drove away, snow began to fall again, blanketing the courthouse in white. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel trapped inside a storm. I felt like the one walking out of it. The days after the verdict passed in a blur of headlines, phone calls, and silence. Denver's gossip mill spun wild, the Whitfield scandal, lies and custody socialite. Son charged with fraud. Every news anchor had an opinion, but I ignored them all. I didn't need validation from strangers. The truth had done what it always does. It carved its way through noise until it stood alone. Still, the quiet that followed was heavier than I expected. My office phone stopped ringing. Clients dropped off without explanation. The partners who had once praised my professionalism now spoke in careful, distant tones, afraid of association. I didn't blame them. I had become radioactive. Rebecca tried to convince me to take time off, but I couldn't sit still. I poured myself into pro bono work, into cases that reminded me justice still meant something, even if the system was flawed. The courthouse felt different now, haunted not by ghosts, but by echoes of voices that once accused me. A month later, Evelyn requested to meet. Against Rebecca's advice, I agreed. We met at a small cafe, far from downtown, where no one cared who she was. She looked smaller somehow, her posture bent, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred her tea. You didn't have to come, she said quietly. But thank you. I stayed silent, waiting. She exhaled, eyes glossy. I believed him because he was my son, because I couldn't accept that the man I raised was capable of something so cruel. Her voice cracked. I let my pride destroy you. For a moment, I saw not the woman who'd stormed into my office, but a mother facing her own ruin. I don't hate you, Evelyn, I said softly. But I can't forgive you yet. She nodded, a tear slipping free. I understand. I don't deserve it anyway. She pushed an envelope across the table. Inside was a handwritten letter. It's for the children, she said. I've started helping Caroline with them financially, quietly. I thought it might be something you'd want to see someday. I nodded but didn't open it. I didn't need proof of her redemption. She was living it slowly, painfully. When I left the cafe, the air was crisp clean in a way it hadn't felt in years. I thought of Ryan sitting in his cell somewhere, still trying to charm his way through consequences. I hoped he'd finally realized that charm and deceit lose their power in a place where truth isn't negotiable. Caroline sent me updates occasionally, photos of the twins smiling, growing oblivious to the wreckage that had once surrounded them. I kept one pinned to my bulletin board, not as a reminder of trauma, but as proof that innocence survives even when adults fail spectacularly. Rebecca visited my office one evening with a bottle of wine. "It's strange," she said, pouring 2 glasses. "Winning sometimes feels like losing." I nodded. "Because you realize how much the fight cost." She raised her glass. "To survival, then." I clinked mine against hers. "To the truth," I said. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, light spilled across the glass walls, painting everything gold. For the first time since the nightmare began, I didn't feel like a victim or even a survivor. I felt like someone standing on solid ground again, someone who had walked through the fire and come out whole. The truth hadn't just set me free. It had stripped away every illusion, leaving only what mattered. And that finally was enough. 6 months later, the city had long moved on from the Whitfield scandal. New controversies filled the headlines, new names replaced ours, but in small corners of quiet places, the consequences still breathed. Ryan was serving a 3-year sentence in a minimum security facility outside Cannon City. The news mentioned good behavior and early release reviews, but none of that mattered to me. The sentence was more symbolic than punitive. It wasn't about time behind bars. It was about the first time he couldn't rewrite the story. Evelyn visited him once a month. Madison rarely did. From what Rebecca told me, their family business had been gutted by the fallout. Their empire, built on reputation, cracked the moment truth touched it. Evelyn mailed me a letter every Christmas now. The handwriting was careful, as if each apology had to earn its place on paper. I never replied, but I kept them in a small drawer in my desk unopened. Some wounds didn't heal by conversation, they just stopped bleeding over time. Caroline, on the other hand, had become an unexpected ally. She invited me to the twins' 7th birthday party, a quiet afternoon picnic in the park. I hesitated at first, unsure if I belonged there, but she insisted. "You're part of their story whether you like it or not," she'd said. When I arrived, the children ran through the grass, chasing balloons, laughter filling the air. Caroline smiled when she saw me. "They know you as Miss Elena," she said, "the lady who helped their mom tell the truth." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "They're beautiful," I murmured. "They look like him." Caroline nodded, her expression bittersweet. "They also laugh like me." "That's enough." We sat together on a picnic blanket as the kids played. For the first time, there was no resentment between us, only 2 women who had been broken by the same man and somehow found grace instead of hatred. Later that week, Rebecca and I closed our last pro bono case of the year. When we finished, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping, "Local attorney honored for integrity and public service." My photo was small, tucked into the corner, but the headline made my eyes sting. "You earned this," she said simply. I smiled. "Feels strange, doesn't it? Getting recognized for surviving." She laughed softly. "That's what integrity looks like when the world's full of noise, it just keeps standing." That evening, I walked home through the quiet Denver streets. The snow had returned soft and unhurried, covering everything in silence. In my apartment, the city lights spilled across my desk, glinting off the framed photo Caroline had given me the twins, grinning frosting on their cheeks, sunlight in their eyes. I placed it next to my law degree, the one that had once been nearly worthless under a mountain of accusations. Together, they told the story of loss and redemption better than any trophy could. Before bed, I stood by the window watching the flakes drift down. There was no grand epiphany, no triumphant music in the background. Just peace. The kind that comes when you've stopped fighting ghosts and started living again. I whispered, not to anyone in particular. "You were right, Rebecca. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just has to wait." And as the city lights flickered below, I finally believed it. There are moments, months after the chaos fades, when I still wake in the middle of the night, expecting to hear his voice, the smooth, confident tone that once convinced me I was the broken one. It used to haunt me, the thought that I'd wasted years loving a man who saw me as an accessory to his perfection. But somewhere along the way, that pain turned into perspective. Pain has a strange talent for rearranging what you value. I used to believe control equaled safety, that if I worked hard enough, behaved carefully enough, I could keep life from collapsing. But the truth is, life doesn't need your permission to fall apart. What defines you is how you rebuild when it does. I learned that strength isn't loud or constant. It's quiet. It's the kind of strength that lets you sit in a courtroom full of people who hate you and not flinch when they call you a liar. It's choosing not to scream when you're right because you know time will speak for you. It's learning to live without needing everyone to understand. That's the kind of strength women like us earn the hard way. When I look back on those years with Ryan, I see now how much of myself I gave away trying to save him. Every appointment, every late-night argument, every desperate compromise, it wasn't love. It was survival dressed up as loyalty. And when the marriage finally ended, I thought I'd failed. But failure looks different from the other side. Sometimes it's just freedom in disguise. I've also learned forgiveness isn't always a door you walk through. Sometimes it's just the decision to stop looking backward. I don't forgive Ryan, not yet. Maybe never. But I've stopped letting his lies narrate my story. That's enough. Evelyn's letters still arrive. I can't bring myself to open them, but I don't throw them away either. They remind me that guilt can grow into something human if you let it. And Caroline, she's building a life for those children where love isn't tied to shame. Watching her do that reminds me there's goodness even after betrayal. When I walk into my office now, sunlight floods the same desk where Evelyn once slammed those photos years ago. The space feels light or sacred even. I keep a single line framed above my desk, something Rebecca said the day the case ended. You don't have to convince the world you're innocent. You just have to live like you are. And that's exactly what I'm doing, living. Not defending, not explaining, just living. If you've made it this far, you already know this story isn't really about fraud or courtrooms or even revenge. It's about truth, the kind that waits quietly while everyone else is shouting lies. For a long time, I thought surviving meant proving myself to every person who doubted me. But the truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs time and courage. If someone ever paints you as the villain in their story, don't waste your life begging them to see who you are. People who want to believe lies will cling to them because the truth threatens their comfort. Let them. The truth has patience you can't imagine. It will outlast every rumor, every whisper, every cruel word spoken behind your back. When I look at my life now, at the sunrise spilling across my office window, at the laughter of children that aren't mine but still make me smile, I understand that peace isn't something you find after the battle. It's what's left when you stop fighting for people who were never in your corner. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away knowing you told the truth even when no one wanted to hear it. So if you're listening tonight and someone's trying to twist your reality, remember this: you don't owe them your exhaustion. You don't have to defend yourself forever. Just keep living like your truth matters because it does. And eventually, it's the only story that survives. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if everyone believed a lie about you? Would you have fought back, or would you have let them drown in their own deceit? Tell me in the comments. I want to know your breaking point, your moment when you decided enough was enough. And if you've ever been where I was accused, dismissed, betrayed, remember the truth doesn't need permission to exist. It simply does.